All right, guys, this has been a video I've been wanting to do personally just for myself, but I thought I'd share it here on YouTube. The Sony FX6 versus the Komodo X. This is more of a color fidelity, like overall image quality test rather than a dynamic range and sharpness test. That's what you guys got to pay attention to. Don't even bother commenting because that's not what this is about. So I'm going to show you guys some comparisons and I want you to guess what camera you think is A and what camera you think is B. I already did this on my friends and it was 50-50 pretty much, which is very interesting. But after that, I'm going to show you guys a trick on how I squeeze a little bit more color fidelity out of something like a Sony FX6, A7R5 or A7C2 or pretty much any camera that you might own. But this one little trick in DaVinci Resolve will kind of, up the quality of all your footage. Let's play the clips first. Again, please participate, comment down below what camera you think is which, because I think some of you guys might even shock yourself on what you end up liking more than the other. Alright guys, so before I give my answers and I start showing all my tricks and to squeeze more color out of this, I kind of want to share my own opinions first. The original red Komodo, I actually like the colors that just a hint more out of that because the skin tones were a little bit more magenta. So I was able to shift the whole white balance a little bit more teal, where on the Komodo X, the colors pretty much match the red Raptor almost perfectly. It's kind of crazy. And the skin tones are a little bit more golden. I won't say yellow, I'll say golden. The Sony does have a little bit more magenta skin tone, so that might give away the answer already. The Komodo X, the color fidelity and the thick satiny colored look. A big part of that is the actual color fidelity they're able to just get with the raw codecs on here and the sensor. That's what my trick will go into. Like just being able to lower that color density on the Sony cameras is what's gonna kind of cheat the look of more color fidelity on the camera. I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes when I'm outside just walking around and I'm looking at shadows, I'll ask people, like say if we're looking at asphalt, I'll ask them, what color is that shadow? They just say, oh, it's gray, it's black. I'm like, nope, there's some blue hues in there because basically whatever the sun is hitting, there's warmer color rays coming through there. It's being filtered through the atmosphere. And then whatever the sun isn't hitting, it's the sun bouncing off the rest of the atmosphere and it's creating that more cooler, bluer look, which fills in all the shadows. So our eyes pick up stuff like that, but we're all kind of jaded with seeing our own color fidelity. Like we just take color for what it is. To where on the Sony FX6, you'll see once we go through the footage, all those like ambient tones are kind of muted out, where on the Komodo, you can see all that ambient saturation, and to my eyes, it is gorgeous, it is beautiful. So with all that said, let's finally get into the footage. I'm going to show you guys my trick on how I kind of get this closer to look like something like this, and I'll give you guys the answer finally. Here we go. All right, guys, here's the answer that you've all been waiting for. Camera A was the red Komodo X. Camera B was Sony FX6. If you got it right, pat yourself on the back. I think more importantly, not just guessing, what camera is which, is more what camera did you like more. The first batch of shots here are all with the film emulation, and then the second batch is just an Arri conversion. A lot of times when people do these camera comparisons, they just slap on the manufacturer 709 LUT. That does nothing because you're able to push the footage however you want. And so it's better to do a standardized conversion. So when we go over the Arri, we're converting mathematically the red log and the Sony log into the Arri log, and then we're using the same Arri LUT at the end of it. So you kind of see how the cameras react to it. Let's just go over this. So this is, again, same film emulation on both cameras. Both of them are converted to the Arri log before the emulation's put onto it. So this is the red Komodo X. This is Sony FX6. Off the bat, you can see the Sony FX6 is way more saturated. That's just kind of how it is off the sensor. It's kind of weird. Just how it is. The main adjustment that I do on the red Komodo X, you see over here, I'm using the color warper to just push those blues a little bit more to that bluish teal look that I personally like. Now on the Sony FX6, the trick that I'm using on here is I'm kind of bringing down the color density. And this is the trick I use to kind of treat the, extra color depth onto this camera. So before we get any deeper to this comparison, I need to show you guys the difference between the 16-bit RAW versus the 10-bit internal codec. So I'm going to zoom to 200% here. Yep, we're going to pixel peep, but we're not looking at pixels. Again, that's not the point of this comparison. Point of this is, you know, overall look and color. This is the Red Komodo X. Let's look at the blue and this black beanie. Where is this blue light coming from? It's coming from the ambient blue sky. Again, whatever the sun hits, it's going to have warmer color, and whatever the sun doesn't hit, it's reflecting off all the ambient atmosphere, and that's creating this blue look. We can see on her cheek here. If you can't see the blue in her cheek, you need to kind of train your eye to start seeing life more like that. Even in her eyelids up here and the reflection of her eye, it's very saturated blue. And the beanie, you can see little bits of blue in here. There's no noise reduction on this either. Chroma noise in here, which is standard for a RAW format. Now let's go to the Sony. You see we have the blue here, but once we get into this beanie over here, it's just, there's the little pixelations of blue, and then it kind of goes into the noise, which again is standard for most cameras. If we just did a chroma noise reduction, that magenta hue would leave there, and this would just be black. So again, this is the Red Komodo X, and you see the blue gradation. You see the blue is very saturated, and it slowly rolls off into black, where on the Sony FX6, that blue just kind of pixelates out. If you look at her skin, where the blue is on the Red Komodo X, right here, you see there's some saturation, there's cooler tones, even in the eyelashes. On the Sony FX6, all those blue tones just kind of go gray. That's the big difference between the 16-bit internal codec versus the 10-bit. While we're looking at the skin tones here, one of the big differences between the Red Komodo color science and the Sony's color science, or just the sensor technology, as you see on the Red Komodo X, we have a lot of different hues in the skin tone here, and there's a lot of different gradations. So we're going from this lighter tone into this deeper tone, and we go where the blue highlights are, you know, you're getting all that gradation, and it looks more realistic. It looks more real life. Where on the Sony FX6, all that kind of gets smoothed out. You see it kind of has like a general gradation to it. There's not a whole lot of tonality to it. I mean, there is, but it's just once you pick up on the Red Komodo X's color fidelity, on the Sony FX6's, it's kind of lacking. So here's the trick that I do. We're gonna start with the trick, and then we'll go over the rest of the comparisons. I'm gonna just turn it on, and you see, it might be subtle to some of you guys. To me, it's a big difference though. You see in the skin tones here, it's bringing down, it's making it a little bit more crunchy. It's giving us that satin velvety, like deeper saturation to the skin tones. So this is with the adjustment off. This is with it on. Now let's go back to the Red Komodo X. You see all of a sudden it matches a lot more. There's still difference. You see the Sony FX6, the color still, it doesn't roll in to the other gradations. It kind of has a tiny bit of a choppy look versus the Red Komodo X. It's just, it looks real. That's the big difference between color fidelity. Once we punch out, here's my adjustment. That's without it. This is with it, without it, with it. You see it's really subtle, but it kind of just takes it to the next level. Now let's break down the shots a little bit more, and then I'll show you guys how I'm doing that trick. So when it comes down to doing the film emulation, the cameras kind of match up in daylight, but when you start pushing the dynamic range and the atmosphere, it starts falling apart a little bit more on the Sony FX6. Let me show you. So this is the Red Komodo X with the same adjustment. Again, I'm just pushing those blues a little bit more towards teal. You can see we have a lot of mixed light going on here. Her skin tones are holding up beautifully though. And you see the blue looks very solid. Now let's go to the Sony FX6. You see this is where it kind of starts falling apart with that 10-bit color. Blue tones up here, they're going a little bit more teal. If you're just looking off the shot by itself, without the red shot, it looks totally fine. But once we go back to the red shot, it just has a more robust, solid look. This is the whole point of shooting with the Red Komodo or the Red Raptor or whatever camera you have. Now let's go to our next shot here. Red Komodo X. Once again, this is a lot of mixed lighting. We have the sunlight putting that warmer light on the asphalt back there and whatever. It's not hitting that blue ambience filling, and the sun's bouncing off the grass. We're standing on my front lawn right here, and you see all that green grass is just bouncing back into her face here. Let's zoom in. So that yellowish tint bouncing back up underneath her face, that's all from the grass. So let's go to the Sony shot. Let's turn off the little secret weapon I'm doing here. So this is Sony FX6 without that tool versus the Komodo X. And then this is it with the tool versus Komodo X. You see it just kind of brings it down a little bit more. Let's go into the skin tones and show the trick. That's with it on, and this with the trick off. So you see this, just the Sony FX6 has a weird, the color tonality is just lifted. And then once I put that trick on, it kind of just, you know, it evens the playing field a little bit more, but still it's really just muting out a lot of those tones. Now let's move to the Arri comparison shots. And this is where I'll show you guys the trick that I'm doing to get a more crunchy look. Let me finally show you guys how I'm doing this. So we have our color warper here. If you go on this next one, we have the color chrome and the luma adjustment. Pretty much whatever skin tones you have, you could just turn on this tool, go to your skin tone and drag down on it. On some shots, it might affect other points of the graph that you don't want to affect. For instance, if I bring down her skin tones here, it also brings down the blues, which for some shots you might want that. Again, it's gonna cheat that color fidelity in her beanie. But right now I don't want that. So I'm just gonna go onto auto lock, and this is gonna just shift 1 point only on that graph, and I can bring it down. And you can see, you can make it look real bad if you wanted to. Her skin don't look like that in person. So you gotta be delicate with this. That's the secret weapon that I'm using. I use that a lot, and it really just helps get like that Kodak Vision 3 printed film type look on the Sony shots. You can use that trick on any footage too. Panasonic, Fujifilm, whatever you want, you can use that. So this is before, that's after. Let's go back to the Komodo shot. You see it's kind of mimicking that look. Now I do kind of want to bring the blues down too, so I'm gonna get that point. Let's just push it. I'm gonna push it a little bit harder. So this is before that adjustment and after. Back and forth. You see all of a sudden, we're getting very similar like color thickness to that red Komodo X. If you already comment which camera you thought was which, go ahead and comment down below if you're right or wrong, and then comment, you know, which camera you end up liking more.